Well, as Lisa pointed out in just a few moments ago, this is one of those weird weeks in our culture, this week between Christmas and New Year. It's kind of a time in between. You know, a time between New Year or Christmas and New Year's, a time between 2015, 2016. It's kind of, if you work in an office or something like that, you know it's probably one of the most least productive weeks of the year, kind of second to March Madness when that comes around. That's pretty unproductive too. But this is one of those weeks that we just kind of like, our culture hits the pause button. It's a time between, much like Moses and the Israelites experienced between, you know, the mighty acts of God in Egypt and the Exodus and the Promised Land, a time between, much like Jesus the night before he died. You know, he was able to look back on God's work in his life and look forward to what he was about to experience. This is a week for us to look back at God's activity in our lives in 2015 and to reflect and to look forward about what God may have in store for us or what God may want to do in us or through us in the new year. And I don't know if you have many end-of-year traditions, but as your pastor, I hope that reflection is one of those things that you do in this time between, that you would take time reflecting on how God has worked in your life, the things that he's carried you through over the last 12 months, the way he's provided for you, the way he has grown you. I hope that you'll be taking time in the coming week to do those things. But this morning, we're going to have a very different kind of worship service, one that's appropriate for this time between, a time to look back and a time to look forward. And I've asked 6 of your fellow Newdayers to reflect on that question and just share one example of how God has proven his faithfulness to them, carried them through experiences, loved them in 2015. I've asked them, as much as possible, to model our core value of authentic community, which means to be as real as possible with their experiences as they share them with us and to be transparent. Now, let me just say, speaking in front of a group this big isn't easy for most people. And then when you ask people to be transparent, it's equally, it just exponentially difficult. No easy thing. And so I'm just asking you to open your hearts to these 6, to applaud their willingness to come and share a part of their experience and their story over the last 12 months. So each person is listed in your bulletin in order if you'd like to follow along, although they may choose to introduce themselves to you. But I'm going to introduce you to our first person who will be sharing his story, Sam Hunergard.
So as I reflect on the last 12 months and think about the blessings that I've been called to share, I'd start out by saying it's just a tremendous answer to prayer that Missy and I and Christian and Chloe are even here. We just love this community. We think that God blessed us so much by calling us to this hospital. And to add on to that, the blessing of this church and for the kids to be able to be part of Mile High Academy, we just are so blessed. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today started back 5 years ago, and even though we only have a few minutes, this starts 5 years ago when we were called to Central Texas Medical Center in San Marcos, Texas. And God really showed me the power of prayer on an organization. Now, I understand the power of prayer individually, but when I thought about the power of prayer as an organization, it hit me really hard as we worked at CTMC. I was called to that hospital, and it was struggling mightily. And competition had just opened up a few miles away, and it took a tremendous impact on our volumes and therefore our ability to be sustainable. And so Richard and I were there together, and we worked hard on a strategy to pull it out of the situation that it was in, and we worked hard on a strategy to open up new programs, to close some ones that weren't profitable. It was a really painful process, but we felt we had a good strategy together. It was a good plan based on solid business principles, and we implemented it. It was blessed by corporate, and we all thought we were going down the right course. About a year into it, maybe a little less, it just wasn't taking off. The hospital wasn't doing what we thought it needed to be doing, and I was sitting in my office having a meeting, one of our regular monthly meetings with our hospital chaplain. His name's Merlin Starr. And I was explaining the situation to him, and I said, Merlin, I just don't understand. What do you think? He said, Sam, have you ever thought about turning this whole hospital over to God? I reflected on that. And he said, have you ever enlisted your leaders to do this daily with you? Now, I'd prayed for leadership, for perseverance, for wisdom, personally, my whole career. And God's blessed me, absolutely. But I hadn't considered turning the organization over corporately to God and enlisting the whole organization to turn itself over to God. And Merlin was right. We started having daily devotions in our boardroom. Everybody was invited. We had reflections on every shift, devotions on every shift, starting them out with prayer for those people who felt comfortable with that. And not so slowly, just over the matter of course of a few months, God changed the glide path of that organization. It was incredible to watch. All the good plans that we put together started taking hold, just like that. It was incredible. People were more productive. Our community relationships were blooming. And everybody was catching the Spirit, and I could see God's hand in this organization. Over the next 3 years, everything just kind of blossomed. And during the last 12 months I was there, we were blessed with a couple of gifts totaling $1 million each. Each one of them benefiting one of those programs that we put into place earlier on. It was absolutely impossible to lose sight of the fact that God had done that, and it didn't have anything to do with the great plans we put together. But that's not the coolest thing. What I'm getting to started in 2015, and it was January. And an attorney that I was working with at the hospital, he worked with us on some reimbursement issues. He shared with me a new federal program that would help us improve our reimbursement through the Medicaid program, and would help the hospital by multiple millions of dollars every year. And, of course, it didn't add any costs to us necessarily, but, of course, there's a catch. There's always a catch. See, what it required was a legislative action in the state of Texas. And in Texas, the state legislature meets every other year for 141 days. Now, the people in Texas will argue that it should be the opposite of that, where they meet every 141 years for 2 days. That's another story. So what we needed to do is to engage a lobbyist to help us weave our way through the legislative process and get our bill filed. And there are only 2 folks that were really qualified to do that. One of those folks was the son of a senator who actually represented us in our district in Texas. His name was Carlos, and I thought it was going to be a perfect match. I mean, local ties, he was right in our district, and why not? Until I asked him for help. He bills by the month, and not an inconsequential sum. And he told me that we should have started this months ago. Of course, that would have helped him out by getting those retainers over several months. He said, I just can't help you. There's just not enough time. There's too much opposition. So I engaged the other lobbyist. His name was Greg, and we started working our options. It was a classic 1 step forward, seems like 2 steps back. We started getting a little momentum with a few representatives, and they'd get spooked by something, and they'd say, no, I can't do that. Time's not right. I don't want to put my other bills at risk. So we ended up back at square one, despite the value of this program to our hospital and our community. Ultimately, I found out later that the other lobbyist, Carlos, was working against us, presumably so he could help us out the next cycle. After 4 months of pushing and pressing to get our bill filed or added as amendment to another bill, we were within a week of the session ending, and we had nothing. We were approaching the weekend of Memorial Day, and remember Memorial Day in San Marcos, Texas, it was all over the national news. There was pretty big floods, 500-year floods. But a Friday before Memorial Day, we found out about a bill that was sitting in a committee. It was kind of a shell bill. It hadn't been used because its companion bill had been passed for the purpose that it was filed for. And we found out that we might be able to use this bill to pass our bill. And all we needed was a connection. So there was a connection to us, and her name was Donna Campbell. And she's an uber conservative, far right-wing Republican, and we had thought about approaching her in the past, and everybody counseled against it because our bill could be viewed as an expansion of a social program or an increase to the tax burden, and that just wasn't going to be touched by her. And they said, she'll try to kill it. Don't even go ask her for help because she'll put it, she'll bury that thing. But she was our only connection. So Sunday comes, Saturday night comes, the Memorial Day floods happen. It's a 500-year flood, tremendous destruction on the city of San Marcos. And I was at the hospital trying to help take care of the community and went over to the Emergency Operations Center where the government was working and helping them out. And who shows up that morning? Donna Campbell. And this is a really long story, and I'm trying to keep it short, Dave. But God put me in the car with Donna Campbell for 4 hours with her and a staff member that Sunday. And I had the chance to explain to her about what was going on. She took that thought, that bill. She took that football. We were at not even a Hail Mary isn't even the words. This is like a 99-yard quarterback draw. She tucked this football under her arm, and she took it to the legislature with less than a week to spare. She navigated the political hurdles. She dodged the people who were trying to stop this thing, and she scored a touchdown for CTMC, God's Hospital in San Marcos. And it passed with literally just days to spare. And there's no way for me to ignore, no way for anybody to explain the circumstances as just circumstantial, or nobody could have planned this. This is truly a God thing, and I just felt it was just such an honor to be able to be a little part of God's miracle. And it's going to provide dividends for this organization who has very little in a very depressed demographic in San Marcos, Texas, and it's able to serve people who really need the health care that CTMC provides in that community. And as I'll never forget this, because there's no way for it to for anything else to explain it. God taking this destruction of a 500-year flood and turning it into such a blessing for an organization that serves Him. So if you're part of a business, don't think that God doesn't care about that business. God is taking care of that hospital, just like I know He's taking care of our hospitals here in Denver. And that's what I had to share. It's just an honor to be a part of this and watch Him work.
So this year I have been more curious about God. So I have asked pastors, teachers, and even my parents about how God questions, and I've gotten many different answers. And I've also gotten very curious when Pastor Dave started talking about values. So I decided to take notes as he started talking about that. And I feel like I have grown a lot through that experience. And he has also taught me that He will never run away from us, but we can run away, but He'll always wait, as long as if we decide to come back. So questions I've had was the end time, and I've gotten many different answers, but we really not really know, because nobody really knows except God. And then I also asked, how does God choose who goes to heaven? And so my mom and everybody's told me that you just have to be a follower of God, and you just have to really say, I want to accept Jesus in my life. And so and I know the more questions I ask, the more I'm going to grow more with God. Yeah.
My talk is about overcoming disappointment. I'm going to be reading out of Psalm 77. I cried out to God. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. What does it mean to cry out to Jesus? In May of this year, I began studying for a promotional exam. There are 2 phases to this test, a written test and then later an assessment center. The studying took up an immense amount of my time, my personal time, and my family time. 260 of my colleagues also signed up for this test. 61 made the final eligible roster. The final eligible roster, but I was only 47 on the list. And after all the preparation that I put into this test, this was very, very disappointing to me. I prayed about it ahead of time. I stepped out of my box. I got a hold of Lisa and Dave, and I said, would you guys remember me on the prayer partners list? Why didn't God remember me or help me to remember during my testing, my interviews? Why didn't God help me with my performance? The biggest reason I was disappointed was because of all the time that I lost with my family. On July 4, 2004, my mother passed away. I took her to Porter Hospital 2 weeks prior to that because she had a pain in her stomach, in her abdomen. She had a blood clot in her large intestine, and this caused her system to go septic. The trauma that her body had internally was just too much. We prayed to God. We asked God to save my mom. But my mom died. Why didn't God heal my mom? It's easy to doubt God when things don't seem to be going our ways. It's easy for our spirits to grow faint. Or as the psalmist said, my spirit grew faint. But then I stop, and I have to take a breath. I have to stand back. There's no evidence that God abandoned me during my testing. And there's no evidence that God wasn't watching out for my mom when she was on her deathbed. Sometimes God has a different plan for us, one that I don't understand, or maybe that I will never understand. And then I remember what's so very right with my life. I remember that I have a wonderful wife who's extremely patient. I have 2 boys who are healthy, and they remind us of their presence every day from dawn till bedtime. We have a home. We've had wonderful travel opportunities. I have been in my career for 10 years. That's pretty good. I have family, I have friends, I find encouragement at church. There's a lot that shows God. And additionally, I know that I can cry out to God when I'm disillusioned, when I'm disappointed, and when I'm discouraged. God doesn't mind if I ask questions. And when you're discouraged, God doesn't mind if you ask questions. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember the miracles of long ago. I will meditate on all your works and consider all of your mighty deeds. Psalm 77, 11, and 12. Thank you.
I think Pastor Dave doesn't know what I'm going to say. He's probably got his fingers crossed. I'll be 90 in about 2 months. So if I flub up, I can blame it on old age. It's amazing when you get old, you can blame so much stuff on old age. You know, it's really great. I was baptized in the Adventist church when I was 17. That was about 1943 or so. I became a work my way Adventist Christian, trying to earn my way into heaven. That's the way it was back then in church. I was always trying, often discouraged. If I accomplished something good and I was proud of what I had done, I would immediately feel guilty for feeling proud. I remember an evangelist speaking in my church one time, and he said, the road to eternal life is steep and narrow, and only 1 in 7 will make it. And I was sure I would be one of the 6 that didn't make it. And about 5 years ago, my husband and I moved to Parker, and we started coming to Newday. It was a shock. I couldn't believe it. Contemporary music, guitars, drums. I love drums. Keyboard. A wonderful group singing praise music. Oh, it was awesome. A woman associate pastor. Awesome. Oh, my goodness. Jewelry was okay. Oh, wedding rings were okay. Casual dress was fine. We found a church where people mattered, not rules. We found people who cared enough to travel to Peru, Nepal, and Africa to take care of the needy. I love the gift store, the Christmas gift store that gives gifts to little children who are in need. We have a lot of groups going in this church. I belong to one. I belong to Grace Group. Hi, guys. Love you guys. This church does all of this and more, not to work their way to heaven because they love people. I love this quote. This is just a beautiful quote. It fits this church to a T. We believe all people matter to God. Therefore, because they matter to us, we will do all we can to welcome the next person into our community. We seek to remove every obstacle other than the gospel so that everyone experiences Newday as a safe place. I love that, safe place. To be on the spiritual journey to heaven. This is Pastor Dave. This is from his series on Our Identity, Part 6, The Next Person. I began to relax in this church and now feel so guilty all the time. Maybe some of the things that I felt guilty about didn't really matter that much to God. I have a text that comforts me a lot. It's Ephesians 2:8. For it is by the grace of God that you are saved through faith. This is not from yourselves. This is a gift from God, and not of your own earning, so that you cannot boast. And then this other one, too. I have another one here, too. This is from my favorite Christian author, Philip Yancey. And he says in his book, What is so amazing about grace? What is the one unique gift that Christianity offers to the world? It's grace. In every other church in the world, you have to earn your way to salvation. I am now at peace, knowing that I am loved and saved. What a way to spend my last days. I will see God, Christ, my guardian angel, my loved ones, and you guys on the new earth. So if I don't see you again on this earth, I'll see you in heaven.
2015 has been the scariest year of my life. But it has also reminded me how truly blessed I am. The second week of January, God led us to Newday. I thought he had brought us here to save our family, but that was just part of his plan. Through a series of events, God guided me to become baptized on Easter weekend. After my baptism, I thought our lives were on track since Christ was leading the way. The week after Mother's Day, a girlfriend and I had made plans for mammograms and coffee. The day before our appointment, she called and asked if we could postpone because she had conflicting plans. I said absolutely, but after I hung up the phone, a voice whispered to me, You need to go. I listened and followed through with the appointment. A week later, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The beginning of my cancer battle began with me completely surrendering to God and letting him show me the way. In order for my journey to begin, I needed to choose a team of doctors. The only feeling I had was that I wanted to be at Parker Adventist Hospital. Through research, I was led to an oncologist who then helped me pick a surgeon. Within an hour of choosing that surgeon, Lorna Erickson, who volunteers at Parker Adventist Cancer Center, called me and said, "I don't know if you found the surgeon, but I know who you should go to." It was the surgeon I had picked. Shortly after that, my stepmom, who works at Castle Rock Adventist, called and said the exact thing that Lorna had just said to me. I knew that this was God working to guide me in the right direction. At an appointment with my oncologist, he told me, "I need you to engage your mind, body, and spirit in order for everything to work." I knew that with complete trust in God, a positive outlook, I would be able to overcome all. Because as said in Matthew 6:27, who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? My oncologist then stated that he would make me a deal. I will pray for you, and you pray for me, and together we'll get through this. During my 5 months of chemotherapy, I've grown very close to my Newday family. Through your support, prayers, and meals, my family has been able to endure much more than we ever could imagine. We have been encouraged to always have more faith than fear, because with God, all things are possible. After chemotherapy and 2 successful surgeries, I am now tumor-free and on the road to a full recovery. My husband and I are firm believers in Romans 8:28, which states, "All things work together for good, for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose." This means that no matter what the situation, good or bad, it is working towards a greatness that has yet to come. During 2015, God has revealed himself to me as being full of unconditional love, support, and guidance. I have always been a believer and a Christ follower, but today I can proudly say that Christ is the leader of my life.
I hope that as you've heard these 6 diverse experiences through 2015, that you have been able to connect and resonate with someone or many of those stories. And again, I hope that in the next week that you would take time to reflect on God's goodness to you in 2015 and the ways that you have grown. Jesus had his own time between that night before he died. All the gospel writers talk about it. But John, in particular, in John 13, talks about this night before Jesus died and this time of reflection. And he says particularly, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. He was looking back and reflecting on all that God had done in his ministry. I imagine he looked around the room and he saw his followers, these men that he had come to love, the fruit of his ministry, these men. But he was looking forward to what was to come in the cross and in his resurrection and in hopefully returning to his Father. He's in the time between. And so the very next word says, "so." Because he had looked back and he had looked forward, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And it describes how he pours water into a basin, and he goes around and he begins to serve his disciples by washing their feet in this time between. And he talked about how it was a way to make them clean. He talked about it being like a bath where they were able to be made clean. And today, during this time between, as we reflect on 2015, we know there are things that we want to take with us into 2016. The things that God has provided for us, the way he has grown us. There are things that we want to continue to allow him to build on in 2016. So we don't want to let go of everything, but there are some things that I'm sure all of us would love to leave in 2015. Mistakes that we have made, sins that we have committed, people that we have hurt, things that we have done that we have regretted. Wouldn't it be great to just be able to step into a new year knowing that you're clean? Wouldn't it be amazing to start with a clean slate, knowing that everything is right between you and God, where your sins have been dealt with? I mean, doesn't that sound good to you? I mean, that's the opportunity that we have this morning by following Jesus' example and what he did with his time between, with what we can do with our time between. And so what we do here at Newday when we celebrate the Lord's Supper is we actually follow Jesus' words. He said we'd be blessed if we followed his example. And we actually say, why don't we wash one another's feet as he washed the disciples' feet? And he talked about it being like a bath, like being cleansed from sin. And wouldn't it be great that this last Sabbath of 2015 to be able to find a partner and say, can I wash your feet? And knowing that in the washing of the feet, that symbolically, spiritually, our sins are being washed away and left into a basin, and we're able to step away from that, knowing by faith we're clean. And so in just a minute, we're going to separate, and we're going to actually do that. We're going to walk through the middle doors if you want to find a partner to do this with, and just come back in here, and we're going to wash one another's feet quickly and then finish up with a simple celebration of the Lord's Supper. If this is something that you'd rather just observe, please know you can just sit and watch, but I would encourage you to use this time to reflect. Reflect, what do you want to keep from 2015, and what do you want to leave behind? And you could just watch if you want. But if not, I would encourage you, after I pray, just to find a partner, find a basin and a towel, serve someone, and know that you are being made clean.